I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. God delivered Israel from Egypt by the blood of a lamb. He took the Israelites out of Egypt, but he couldn't get the Egypt out of the Israelites. It took 40 years in the desert to do that. We as Christians have been delivered from sin, for he who is dead is freed from sin. We have died with Christ. But sometimes it's very difficult to get the world out of us. We're in the world, but not of the world. So how does a Christian think in such a way? What does he think about in order to be delivered out of this world in his mind? I think the answer is our text. In Romans chapter 1, or chapter 12 and verse 1, it says that we present our bodies a living sacrifice. This is definitely an allusion to the Old Covenant burnt offering. There, when the Israelites were encamped, a burnt offering was offered every morning and every evening. That burnt offering, of course, was a shadow of Jesus who would come. But it happened every day. And it happened not just once, but it happened twice. And it happened to remind the Israelites that while they still sinned and while they still made mistakes, that the sweet sacrifice and smell of sacrifice was going up to God every day for them, because their sins were paid for. That's what happens with us Christians. I believe he's saying to us every single day in our minds, in the morning when we get up and in the evening when we go to bed, that we remember that Jesus was not alone on that cross. That while Jesus took the full fiery wrath of God against sin, that he did it for me. And that on that cross, he paid for my sins. And it wasn't just him on that cross, it was me as well. For I have died with Christ. It is no longer I that live, but Christ that liveth in me. That's what happens every day. I think of the cross in the morning, I think of the cross in the evening, and I remember who I am and what has happened to me because of that cross. But then he continues, and be not conformed to this world. Do you know peer pressure is an amazingly powerful thing? I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, though unbelievable, they're true. Once a man walked into a doctor's office and everyone was sitting there in their underwear. And within 20 minutes, this man took off his clothes and sat there in his underwear too. Another man got into an elevator, and everyone in the elevator was facing the back. Now, there was no door back there, mind you. But by the time they got to the 5th floor, he was facing the back too. And I know those are true stories because they happened on that program, Candid Camera. If you remember, it was a program where they pulled tricks and were able to fool people. And it showed the power of peer pressure. We are being pressured as Christians constantly, daily, to accept the world's view of things. We've come to a point in this life where sin is no longer sin, where they're changing the meaning of everything. And if you don't go along, you're not like everyone else. You have to accept these things that the Bible calls sin. as though they were normal. The Bible says, our verse says, do not be conformed to this world. But it says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The word renewing means the changing of your thinking, because how you think is your reality. Remember in the 70s when they were having that rash of hijackings of airplanes to Cuba? A man got on the plane and wielded a gun and convinced the pilot to turn around, and that he was going to hijack that plane, and everything was going all right up until a point. And then all the passengers on the plane started laughing. And they were laughing the whole time the plane turned around. And regardless of how angry the hijacker got, they continued to laugh. They laughed as the plane set down, and they were continually laughing, all except one man. He wasn't laughing at all. He was afraid that someone was going to be killed. You see, that man's name was Alan Funt, the creator and director of the television program Candid Camera. Everybody on that plane thought that at any moment he was going to stand up and say, "Smile, you're on Candid Camera." Now that wasn't the reality, though. But the reality didn't matter. It was what they believed in their mind. They believed in their mind it was all a joke, that it wasn't real. What you believe makes all the difference in the world. There's an old story about an eagle who dropped his egg into a barnyard, and the egg fell into the nest of a chicken, and it hatched. And the little eagle grew among the chickens, always afraid and running every time the chickens ran, acting like a chicken, pecking the things on the dirt, living like a chicken. And when a snake appeared, he would run with all the other chickens and scream because he thought he was a chicken. And then one day he looked up into the sky and he saw an eagle with its wings stretched out in its majestic flight. And then he saw in its claws a snake. The eagle wasn't afraid of the snake. The eagle was going to eat the snake. And then one day he looked at himself in a puddle of water and he saw, "I'm no chicken. I'm an eagle. I don't belong here. I can soar among the clouds." And he ran and he took off and he flew in the clouds, no longer afraid of snakes or eating off the dirt. He was what he was created to be. As Christians, we have to realize what we're created to be. That we were created to soar with the eagles and not to eat off the dirt of this world. Then we'll be able to prove what the good and acceptable will of God is in our lives. If this podcast has been an encouragement to you, please go to John D. Kimbrough to hear more. If you have any questions, you can email me at that site. Thank you.